Hi, this is Luke Johnson. I want to welcome you back to the now third installment of our Augustine discussions with Jordan Cline.
Greetings.
Before I go into all that, I wanted to announce that we have our first sponsor.
Yeah.
Mika's Morse has made us some really awesome
I'll
swag.
Bring it closer. There we go.
So you can go on the Noetic website here shortly and to her Etsy shop and get Morse code bracelets, specifically the ones that we're offering through the website. Are justice, truth, beauty, and noetic, things that we try to accentuate here. Anywho, so what I wanted to do before we launched into our next discussion is sort of do a little bit of a recap, recapitulation of what we talked about last time. And we left off the last podcast trying to get our minds around why people commit evil, right? Specifically when they know what the good is, right?
Right.
And you left us with this answer that it was inordinate desire, which sort of overwhelmed the individual. But we're trying to understand how exactly we make this distinction between natural desires, say something like the natural desire for procreation, and how that crosses the divide into something salacious and evil, and deleterious to the individual. How exactly does that happen when regular sexual appetite or appetite for anything, any sort of natural desire, becomes something really ruinous to the individual? So I think you said it may have something to do with reason.
Right.
And I'm going to shut up now and kind of put the ball in your court. So go.
Sure. Okay. So one point of clarification I want to bring up is the term cupidity, because that comes up in the text. And personally, I didn't find it super helpful. So what did I do?
Why was that word problematic for you? Why did you struggle with that
because
word?
it's just a Latin-y word. It's just a Latin word with itty added onto it. So I had to brush up on my Latin, and I went to the dictionary, and it's from the noun cupiditas, cupiditatis. So that means excess desire or avarice, so greed. Mm-hmm. So when I was thinking about, and then at that point I kind of thought, well, okay, like what makes us like greedy? Is that sort of like living beyond our like sort of limitations? And how do we get to that point? Like what spurs us to go beyond our limitations? Like, I could have just one cookie and be fine, but like over the holidays, like treat yourself. Like I had 12 gingerbread men in one sitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel you. I've eaten more carrot cake in probably the last 3 weeks than I have in my entire life.
Yeah.
So what were you able to clarify by this sort of investigation into how we cross this divide into evil and sin, like where we go beyond sort of the normal constraints of the individual? Now, I think we can sort of postulate, we can sort of develop our own theories, but I think we want to keep it married closely to the Augustine text. Right. What can he say that illuminates this particularly troubling matter? Because he's the one who got us into this in the first place. I don't think we would necessarily on our own say, okay, evil is the result of an inordinate desire, because, I don't know. I struggled with this part of the text because I don't know if inordinate desire always leads to evil. Like, I have lots of things that I have an inordinate desire for, but I don't act on them, right?
Like you think about it, but you filter it out, or you decide maybe another time.
Yeah, there's all the times, like I'm a very calm, collected person, but I still get angry.
Road rage.
Right? Like
I've seen some of the nicest people I know turn into complete monsters on the road.
Right. Like, so there definitely been instances where I wanted to do something that would have been evil. The inordinate desire was definitely within me, but I didn't do it. And so I don't necessarily think of myself as doing something evil because I didn't commit the evil. The evil was in my breast. It was in my heart, but I didn't do it. And it happens all at the same time with like lust, and it happens with cheating, and it happens with any domain of life. There are going to be things that we desire but we don't act upon because we're restrained, I guess, by reason. I guess that maybe was what was problematic about the way that we left off the discussion is like, well, if reason's really going to be the thing that determines when we're committing evil or not, is reason not being properly applied to me if I'm still having that inordinate desire and yet I'm not committing it? Like, has reason not fully interpenetrated my being? Is it enough for reason just merely to keep me from behaving in an evil way? Ought reason to be applied to my soul in a deeper, more profound way? And I guess that's what I'm curious what Augustine has to say about this.
Yeah, and I would say that, and I think that this is kind of rooted in like Aristotle, right? This idea that reason is what makes us different, or in his mind superior to animals, right?
Yeah, he has an interesting example for this. Do you remember the example that he has for that?
Oh gosh, he has so many.
He talks about how
which one?
Where he talks about how like some animals are superior to men.
Right. So this idea of domestication and this idea that we as humans could domesticate, large scary animals like oxen that
elephants
in the wild would want to trample us to death, but we've managed through thousands of years of domestication have been able to utilize them for functions like especially plowing.
Right, so there are all these animals, right?
Yeah.
Which is super fascinating. There are all these animals that could utterly obliterate us at any moment, right? Like there's saber-toothed tigers and elephants and pterodactyls. I don't know. Well, actually, that's a bad example, guys. I don't think they were contemporary.
Gosh, I hope they're around still.
Yeah, but the point being is that nature is red in tooth and claw. It could totally destroy us and annihilate us at any moment. But here we go. We're in a public library. The animals are in a zoo. If they ever start to intrude upon our space, we just call animal control and take them out. He says the capacity for us to sort of keep the animals at bay is our reason. But it doesn't work the other way around. Their physical superiority can't suppress us. Right? So from that deduction that man's reason can cause him to subjugate the whole of nature, what kind of conclusions does he make about the power of reason, its origination, and maybe how it ought to be applied to the human soul?
Right. And so he kind of makes it like, like a hierarchy. The idea that, it's almost like keeping house in a way, and that if you are a good steward of your soul, you'll keep your soul will keep your physical desires in check. And then he kind of spreads that sort of throughout, on a macro level by saying that there's like this hierarchy of higher beings which are superior and more reasonable, which ought to subjugate inferior subjects.
All right, so I want to go back to the application of reason to the human soul and how that might possibly work. But, we take it for granted that philosophers are going to deify reason because philosophers are lovers of wisdom. They have a natural sort of prejudice and inclination towards reason and stuff like that. But there have been some philosophers, I think of Nietzsche specifically, who think that there has been something problematic about this universal application of reason, and that this in some way domesticates what's so beautiful about the human spirit.
Right.
Why, on Augustine's view, should we get our house in order? For reason, like what is this higher order? How does reason fit into the Augustinian worldview, or universe view, or metaphysical universe view? As far, could you possibly talk about that a little bit, and then we can start talking about what that application looks like?
Sure. I think in my mind it almost occurs just on a simple individual level. Our capacity to reason gives us the choice to choose to engage in sinful acts, or to eschew or shun sinful acts. So I think that by placing such a strong emphasis on reason, that brings the culpability and the responsibility of sin and sort of spiritually where a person is going based off of reason, if that makes any sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes it so that it makes us unlike the animals, right? It gives us sort of autonomy, and it gives us this sort of ability to choose. I guess the thing that I'm trying to touch on here, and I thought this was one, and maybe we're going a little bit further ahead in the text than we ought to, but maybe we can just sort of hint at what is going to come, and correct me if I'm wrong, because like I said, it's been a little while since I've read this, is that reason is going to be this sort of faculty that connects up to something larger, right?
Right, exactly. So thank you. You put that very, very aptly. It's a really strong correlation. It's to be, I think, aligned with reason is to be closer to God.
Right. So it's almost how if God is sovereign over all the physical universe and all the things that are in it with or whatever, like reason is going to be one of the ways that God orders man or allows man to order himself, because presumably if God is ordering man through reason, then man is going to be thoroughly determined, and then there's not going to be freedom. But it almost seems like to me when we touch into reason, we're sort of kissing the divine, or we're coming in contact with the divine.
Almost like a link, or like maybe not a direct line, but some sort of line to God.
Yeah. So I think that's what's really fascinating about this, and I hope at some point it's a little further than what we're probably going to talk about today. What I really loved is how when Augustine's talking about how God orders the universe, this is his musings on number, and
that was like my favorite. That was so cool.
Super fascinating.
Yeah, that was awesome.
But it's probably a little bit further.
It's a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So, but let's keep it with the reason. Okay, we sort of given this hazy sort of sketch that God may sort of implant reason within man so as to properly order him. Okay, so let's talk about that application of reason to man. All right. So how do we know when a desire is out of control and when to exercise that reason so that it sort of curbs it and we don't go and commit some atrocious evil? So I guess there's a question here is, reason tells us when not to commit the evil, to act on it.
Right.
Reason also tells us when even if we're not committing the evil, like it's swelling up inside of us, that we need to get it under control. And then so we can actually get to a point where our passions are operating within sort of their proper confines. So it seems like the way that we've been talking about evil so far, it's not enough to refrain from evil to not do evil on Augustine's view. It's refrain. You've got to somehow calm the passions for evil that you may not even act upon, and otherwise you're still committing evil. Because you're still having inordinate desire.
You're still thinking about it.
You're still bathed in inordinate desire.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the fact that, whether or not if it's you're actually actively acting on it, or if it's just brewing and festering, in Augustine's mind, you're equally guilty for both.
Right. So how... I mean, that's a tough pill to swallow, right?
Yeah,
because it's really effing hard to be a good person in the eyes of the world, right? Mm-hmm. I think I've made I'm 36 years old. I think I've made 5 mistakes in my life that I just wish I could have back. I'm just damn it. And if I were to confess all my sins here or whatever, I think everybody would be like,
okay,
bye. Those are peccadillos. Is that the word for my small sins? Peccadillos?
I forget
what the word is for small.
I'll take your word for it.
But they'd be like, those small sins, Luke, you shouldn't be tossing and turning about those at night. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So but it's really hard. And I think you're a good person too.
Thanks.
From what I can tell. Right? But how hard is it for you to be a good person? Is it hard? Is it hard for you to be a good person?
Case in point, Snowpocalypse. I was at a hardware store trying to get shovels, and luckily there were plenty of shovels, but I thought, man, when I was walking in there, I was like, if there can be 2 shovels, I'm gonna push some people out of the way. I need that shovel. So you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. That is my shovel, and I'm gonna get
like some Black Friday kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
I was like, well, if it's gonna be a feeding frenzy, then I'm gonna be aggressive.
I noticed this.
And I'm a nice person, but there's those sort of situations where it's just almost like a mob mentality, but still, you're still governed by that impulse of I want that shovel. Isn't
it interesting how we had this blizzard and how I started after about 4 or 5 days, we about descended into anarchy. The boundaries of society really started to break down there for a second. People were getting in fights over parking spaces that they had shoveled out, and it really brought a lot of interesting questions.
On the converse side, I've also seen a lot of good in humanity. I've chatted my neighbors up. I've gotten to know my neighbors a lot better through all collectively shoveling. So there's been a lot of good, but then there are a lot of bad things with insane blizzards.
Yeah,
the one that we had last week.
Yeah, totally.
It shows the best and worst in humanity.
That would be when we do some more political philosophy, when we talk about community building and things like that. I think that's probably a topic we should address.
Example.
But so it is hard. It's hard enough to be a good person in the eyes of the world, and then we've got this other layer where we've got this internal life where we can't have any impure thoughts.
Right.
Oh God.
Yeah. But Augustine, of all people, I mean, he had a crazy youth.
True. So but he's gonna what Augustine's gonna say is you can't. It's not like eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, where like someone can go into your head and annihilate all the evil urges. Like humanity, despite what we do, we cannot on our own eradicate inordinate desire from us, and that's going to be part of his talk about why there's such radical depravity and why we need to be saved and things of that nature. But to the most that presumably we have some control. Like we can't, we're born into these bodies. They sometimes exert their influence on us involuntarily. Like there are thoughts that come into my head that I'm just like, how did that get there? Like that is, I'm a crazy person.
Or you're like, ooh, that's dark.
Yeah, that's some messed up stuff. Well, who thought that one up?
Yeah.
Man, I wonder if we're going to be committed because of this podcast. I think I've confessed more than you, but they'll definitely go for me first.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I'll throw you under the bus.
Oh, damn, you just take over.
Yeah, exactly. That's been my plan all along.
But I think but there is some room. We don't have to settle for being sinful creatures. We can purify ourselves somehow through becoming... I get the sense from Augustine that we can somehow purify ourselves by becoming more rational.
Right. And
how does that work? And can we give the people a concrete example? Like, so if we take an appetite that's on that precipice of external committing the act and where it's like restraint, whether it be for food or for sex or for cheating or for anger, whatever those things are, how reason can order the soul. And I'm going to have to lean a little bit on you on that because like I don't recall precisely how he squares that circle. I'm a little bit removed from the text. So help me understand how you understand Augustine on this particular matter about how reason can rein in inordinate desire, or can it? Is it impotent in this way?
I don't think he necessarily gives a really definitive answer.
This is my problem with Augustine. Is he brings them up, he says these things, and I'm not sure
he just really... kind of almost like leads you into the maze, and then he just kind of sometimes will just kind of walk off and come back at some point. But I think what's really important, he says in the text that sin and like the blemish of sin doesn't destroy the beauty of the soul. And it's really the act of punishment that restores the soul to a state of perfection and beauty.
Temporal or eternal punishment?
Oh, eternal. Are we talking temporal punishment? Because that's a whole other
it is a whole
fish.
It is a
that's
whole
other different thing.
Yeah, see, I'm gonna.
Sorry, I'm so eager about like the divine law. I'm like, oh, let's just go for it.
Yeah, and we'll get there. But presumably it would be possible to live a life where you have relative little impact on society in sort of a negative way, where from a phenotypic perspective, you are doing no harm, but you have all this crazy stuff that's going on inside of you that only you and God know. Mm-hmm. But temporally, you're not necessarily committing injustice towards anyone. You're just fulminating with inordinate desire within you, mm-hmm. and that presumably on an eternal perspective, God's going to deal with that.
Right, so it's almost like a function of a time that we can't conceptualize.
Right. Well, so is God going to, if we have this fulminating inordinate desire within us temporally, is God going to exact justice on us here and now?
He doesn't really say that. Since he's like a Neoplatonist, he's all about, these things exist in the universe that we can't grasp in our sort of like time and with our own minds. So that's the thing that kind of left me kind of unsatisfied, you know what I mean, of the idea of what you brought up in your talks about self-defense. Yeah. And, it's a little unsatisfactory.
I don't think he ever answered it, to be honest.
When he just says, God will punish them, and then you're just kind of left sitting there saying, well, when? Will it happen in my lifetime? I'd hope so,
It may not. It may not.
Yeah, so that's the thing. It's like almost the idea that you just have to ride it out until retribution comes along.
Well, so even if God doesn't temporally punish people, like on Augustine's view, there will be an eternal day of reckoning. So we have this. So we have this impetus to get our house in order.
Right.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, if Augustine is silent on the issue of how reason cleans us up, maybe we can do some of that work for him.
Right.
Like, so let's take an example. What's an example you feel comfortable talking about?
Sure.
Appetite, like gluttony, maybe.
Yeah.
I noticed you.
Yeah.
I noticed
I'm a
you.
foodie. I love food.
You like the food stuff.
Yeah.
So
I'm all about that.
So let's say I used to weigh 300 pounds. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'm like killing myself slowly with food.
Right.
Okay. And I'm able to put myself on a really restrictive diet, or maybe I'm able to take some measures like, I save up enough money to get a special surgery that curbs my appetite or whatever.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But the desire within me for food, more than I need, never goes away. How would reason diminish that inordinate desire? Like, how might that work?
I mean, I think in terms of like consequence, right? Or like the impact it would have on yourself or people you care about. You know, I mean, like that's...
Well, if you've got it under control
Yeah.
from the consequence perspective. I'm saying, like, so you
you
put yourself in the
internal
diet.
damage.
Yeah.
You know, I think part of it has to do with guilt. You know, it's you kind of have to live with that guilt of like feeling gluttonous all the time. Or
Yeah,
being,
I think that's
like selfish. Sometimes, you know, it's like that idea of like maybe you're acting in a way that's selfish, like regardless of the, I don't know, like the downfall or vice or whatever. My question is it inherently selfish, and is that's what is one of the reasons why it makes it so sinful?
Well, you know what I think?
Because it kind of stomps on God's creation, which is like something that we're supposed to like respect and honor and cherish, you know, if we're, you know, good Christians.
Well, you know what I'm thinking about here, and maybe this goes back to the temporal justice aspect of this, and maybe you can speak to this from Augustine, is I can think of scenarios where I have curbed where I have reined myself in the ability to express evil, but I'm still have the inordinate desire going on within me. I know that inordinate desire going on within me is wrong.
Right. Exactly.
And so maybe the temporal justice, if we can do a little work for Augustine, or maybe we're jogging something, maybe the temporal justice is when we're afflicted by the inordinate desire, like when we're having these, like we're just fantasizing about Twinkies all the time,
right,
or whatever the thing that we shouldn't be thinking about, like we're starting to sort of hate ourselves. And perhaps that is the way that God's justice is applied to us.
Right. It's
in
that
a temporal
sense of like torment.
Exactly. I think I read today's Groundhog Day, and and there's you know the Bill Murray movie. There's an article. There was an article floating around called Plato and Groundhog Day, and it talks about how Plato uses the example of this ring that gives people all these powers, and
and people abusing that power.
And they go out and they do all the power, and they to do whatever they want in the world, and they find that they're not happy, and ultimately they're afflicted, and ultimately he says people start to become happy when they start performing acts where they're benefiting others, and so like ultimately happiness is going to be something when you're like best friends with yourself. Or when you're your best friend, when you respect yourself, is ultimately when you're going to have happiness. And it seems like if we still have this inordinate desire going on within us, we're going to hate ourselves a little bit. And so there's going to be, so maybe if we don't want to believe in God and all of that, maybe we can take something from Augustine on this temporal level, that there are certain sort of laws built into the nature of reality that will sort of afflict us if we have this inordinate desire going on. I still think we're wrestling with this question of how does reason expunge inordinate desire from us? I mean, is it just like we have to develop coping mechanisms to like diminish it? Like, you know, how does reason do that? Like, I can think of an example.
Okay.
And maybe this is the way it's got to be, is that reason's got to be particularized to the particular phenomena of addiction. I used to smoke cigarettes, right?
I'm addicted to coffee. I love coffee.
Well, does it afflict you? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
I used to smoke. I
smoked my wallet.
Yeah, I smoked cigarettes till I was 28 years old. Right? Okay, not a lot, but enough. Okay, and like, I really wanted to quit, and like, I couldn't just like gradually wean myself off of it. And I was like doing these things where I'd like buy a cigarette, like buy a pack of cigarettes, buy a cigarette, and then throw the pack away,
Right.
then go into the garbage, get the cigarettes out, and then smoke another one. Because I was like going crazy trying to smoke a cigarette. And it really wasn't until I was just like, I have to complete, from a rational perspective, I was like, I have to remove myself from these types of behavior altogether if I'm ever going to get this affliction of inordinate desire
Right.
under control. So maybe Augustine can't specify precisely how reason deals with inordinate desire, because there's so many different things that we can become addicted to and have inordinate desire for. And so maybe he doesn't say to give us some liberality.
I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with like reason and will. You know what I mean? I don't know if they're interchangeable, but there's such a strong correlation between the two. And
what does he say about the will? Because Augustine, that's going to be a very important move in the history of philosophy, is that I don't know, like, we take for granted certain sort of psychological faculties.
Yeah, we totally take so many constructs for granted.
We take the superego, the id, the ego, whatever. Every 150 years, we sort of carve up the mind differently. What's interesting is that I'm not sure when Augustine is writing this book how popular the idea of will is. So the way that Augustine's carving up the human mind, he's carving it up into reason, he's carving it up into all these different types of inordinate desires, and then he's going to introduce this faculty of will. Now, did Plato and Aristotle have this concept of will available to him, or is he innovating here?
This is such a Roman idea. So it was like this idea that at least in the Roman Republic especially, it was you having a sense of will or extreme acts of will it's like what made you human. It kept your like animus, like your spirit beating. So you were defined. I'm just gonna let you talk. Tell me everything you know about the will as Augustine conceives of it, and how it may be related to reason. Right. So, I mean, this is just, it's so deeply ingrained in sort of the Roman imagination. So let's take Saint Perpetua, for example. She was a noblewoman from Carthage in, I think, 200 CE, and it was the Emperor Geta's birthday. And as a part of the state cult, you were supposed to give offerings for the health of the emperor. And she said, no thanks, don't want to do it. I'm Christian, not all about that. And, people kept imploring her, please do this. You're a noblewoman. This is crazy. You don't have to be condemned to the arena. And she just had a kid, so she had a baby. Mm-hmm. And she said, nope, these are my convictions. I'm going to do it. So in the Roman imagination, and it kind of follows with a lot of the radical Christians, this idea that these extreme acts are an act of will. Her father in the account, is an old man, and he is like the head of the household. He's the pater familia. So he has the power of life and death over his family. And he is so humbled by this act of will. He is on his knees grabbing onto her dress saying, please don't do this. Like, think of me. Think of your child. And she says, no, I'm like holding on to my beliefs.
So a will, if I understand this correctly, so we've got, it's kind of like this midpoint between desire and reason.
Right.
So her inordinate desire, she may have an inordinate desire for life.
Right. And and her child, like, think about that, to ultimately reject your own biological role as a mother, Right. That takes so much willpower to do that.
And I guess her rational side would be her principles.
Yeah, her principles, right.
Okay.
That'd be the rationale.
So the will, it could go to inordinate desire, it could go to reason.
Right.
Both are present in them.
Right.
In a person. But she's going to marry her will to the rational aspect of her.
Right. So that's the kind of will that Augustine would praise, because it's godly.
So this maybe we have a better understanding of how reason applies itself to the individual.
Right.
It's not like here's reason and it coming down on top of inordinate desire and somehow cleaning it up or whatever. It is a resolved decision of the will to be with reason rather than inordinate desire. So we have these three faculties going on.
Right.
And the more that the will clings to reason, in time,
it weakens the inordinate desire.
Inordinate desire has less of a stranglehold on the will.
Right. So the thing is that I don't think the three things are mutually exclusive. I think that they kind of all have this, working relationship. And I think it's kind of the more you pair reason with will, the more it can check or subdue inordinate desire over time.
So, all right. So I think we figured a lot out here. Okay. I think we had a big breakthrough on this. So, if that's kind of what the human makeup is, reason, inordinate desire, will, purify the will by marrying it to reason. What does this mean in regards to animals? Right? So we started this whole conversation off about the superiority of men to animals and how men can domesticate animals or whatever. So if men have this capacity, and men, I use that in the collective sense of the word, right? If men have this capacity to subjugate animals, right? What do animals lack that humans have? Is it because so what do they lack? And then so let's set up this hierarchy, right? So we figured out, all right, so man has reason, will, and desire. Mm-hmm. What do animals have?
I think they just have desire, right? I mean, according to Augustine, they would just have desire, right? Desire to not be eaten, desire to eat, desire.
Would they have a will?
That's, I don't know. I mean, there's some animals that if you're taking your dog for a walk down the block, and if they don't want to go in that direction, they'll just put on the brakes and you can drag them along.
They can assert.
This is where
They can assert will. They just. Yeah. Augustine's going to say they definitely don't have reason. Reason is what humans have, and that allows us to domesticate them. So animals are people subtracted reason. Right. So they have will and desire. But then we have an interesting thing is what's this tension between will and desire? When do we know that they're just going off pre-programmed conditioning? Right. And when is it an assertion of the will? When is a dog being bad? Right? When it resists its owner or whatever.
Yeah, and especially with animals, just since we know so much more about animal behavior and research, a lot of the views that Augustine has about animals, I tend to disagree with.
Well, I think animals have a will, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I think that they have so many more faculties that we still don't know of yet.
And they may have a proto reason too. It's
think about Coco the gorilla,
Yeah. Well, it's like saying that all animals are the same. Because presumably a slug is very different from a gorilla. Right. A slug is going to be much more married to instinct than a porpoise. Right? Mm-hmm. So maybe this is... but... And then it also presupposes that humans have reason in the same capacity as well. Right? That every human... Because you and I may naively think that... And we think that anybody's listening or watching to this is just like us. Right? But that's a naive... Of a like kind. That's a naive point of view. Right?
A little bit.
The fact of the matter is, you, me, and everyone who's listening, we're probably black sheep and kind of aliens in our community and stuff like that. We're weird.
A little bit, maybe.
Probably. So there might be... Not everybody may be gifted with the same rational faculty, and you start thinking there might be some animals that can cross that rational line.
Is it a scale, do we think, or I don't know, a ladder? That's what I'm kind of
How much reason does a human have to have in order to have free will? And then then you start having this situation where you and I, we might be on the higher end of that of individuals who have the rational capacity, right? So does that mean it's easier for us to purify our wills because we're more rational?
Right.
But if reason rules so supreme in intelligent people, then why do so many intelligent people
stupid things?
like engineer holocausts and things like that? If we know very well that being intelligent and reason is not enough to have a pure will. So this raises a lot of problems. But presumably on the Augustinian worldview, And on the Augustinian worldview, man is reason, will, instinct, or inordinate desire, or desire, whatever. Animals are going to be will and desire to some degree, right? And then plants are just going to be like
just
desire, I think, right? Mm-hmm. And then matter would
be just
inanimate. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have anything. I mean, so you see, like plants, like they have what desire,
a desire to grow, desire
like they
to
bend
reach
towards
for sunlight.
they bend towards the light, or like Venus flytraps will get hungry and eat like flies, I guess, hamburger meat, whatever they fed on the Addams Family. So but what's going to be really interesting as we go deeper into the Augustine text is that we're not supposed to just think about those life forms that are below us, right?
But everything above.
Right? It's like that. Like what's super crazy is like we're sitting here, sort of creating this hierarchy of man, animal, plant, particle, right? But presumably, on Augustine's worldview, they're going to be angels.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then there might be something. I don't know if he talks about
it's
like
humbling in a way, though, isn't it? Because it's kind of the hierarchy that he creates. He just kind of right off the bat is like, "Hey, humans, you're not number one."
No, that's what's really great about this text is that
I kind of like that. You know,
it's weird because on the one hand, it's desperately trying to give dignity to humans and show us how much power we have over our situation, but at the same time how powerless we are to these things that are inbuilt and to where we are in the natural order. So like it's frustrating because like on Augustine's view there is going to be this both visible and invisible sort of hierarchy, and like we're kind of stuck.
Yeah, it's interesting because he says that people who grumble about their lot in the hierarchy, he just says well, they're just being spiteful.
What's interesting is like I wonder, like sometimes I think to myself, I just wish I could be a pig and roll around in the filth, like I think I was listening to some Voltaire or something like that, and he philosophers are known for being so misanthropic and people
relish it.
They were just like, why can't you? Someone said to, I think Voltaire is like, why can't you just be happy? And he's like, why can't you just be like everybody else and be happy? Why do you have to be so melancholic? And he's just like, it's just a happiness that I don't desire. I'd rather be afflicted by intellectual melancholy than to be blissfully happy like everyone else. I wonder. If there are angels and gods and things like that, I wonder if they ever lust to be a part of the lower level of the hierarchy. Like, I wonder if angels, like, just like humans be like, man, I just wish I could have a lobotomy and be like a pig. I wonder if an angel's ever just like, oh man, I just wish I could be like a human. It's really hard to be an angel.
Well, I think that it's just kind of, they're happy because they don't sin, and he basically just says that
then what's
they're
the
so happy that they don't have to sin, and they don't sin because they're happy.
Well, that's the interesting thing, right? So if humans are...
So can we aspire to that, and become, relatively...
Watch that pride, Jordan.
Yeah, but hubris. But then, of course, there are people like me who would get, struck down by God for saying, I can be like an angel, maybe.
Well, what is it? So let's think about that for a second. So if humans are reason, will, instinct, what would an angel be? You're saying that an angel does not sin,
right? I think.
Why do humans sin, and why wouldn't angels? What is it? What faculty? But then
there's also Lucifer. When you bring,
we'll get to Lucifer later. Let's talk about angels right now.
Okay. I'm just saying he was an angel. He started off as one.
I know. Well, we got to think about why he was.
I'm starting to dig myself into a hole though. I'm like, oh no.
let's just speculate for a second. What and I think we're getting close to 40 minutes, so let's just speculate for a second and then.
Okay.
Bring this one to a close.
Okay.
So you said angels don't sin. Okay? Humans, though they can resist it, do sin. What is driving human sin?
I think it's just the inordinate desire, right?
Well, where does inordinate desire come from? I think it's embodiment.
Yeah.
It's being
miserable,
living in this meat sack.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe angels don't sin because they don't have a physical body?
Right.
Would that be
right? Yeah.
I mean, I'm just guessing here.
I don't think angels like eat or sleep. I think they just kind of enjoy contemplating in God's greatness all the time. Like, I think that's
so. If an angel doesn't have a physical body, it has no inordinate desire. So it just has, but it still has a will.
It still has a will,
right? Because obviously Lucifer was able to rebel against God in this hierarchy and disobey.
Right.
So if an angel has a will, and presumably he's got an angelized intellect as well, unless the body gives us our intellect.
Yeah, I mean, I would just think that we get our knowledge from God, right? If we're following the Augustine line of logic. Because do animals know? This is, yep.
Well, I'm just trying to think, if angels, we're presupposing that angels don't need bodies to have an intellect.
Right.
And that they have reason. And they have a will. So it's just a matter of their will. It's almost like, what's strange about the angel situation, if they don't have a body, is that they don't have the inordinate desire there from the bodily perspective to, like, whereas the will was a midpoint between our inordinate desire and reason, they don't have the inordinate desire, so they can just bring will and intellect together all the time. So if it would just be left at that, it may be the case that angels are better than us, but they may be unfree. Because they don't have to, the will doesn't have to choose between desire and reason. It just coheres with reason. But we know that's not true because of the case of Lucifer. So the angels have to be able to be tempted by something. But if they don't have a body, all they've got is
something like power, right? I mean, Lucifer wants to be powerful like God.
So is power an inordinate desire that springs from the intellect alone?
Who knows?
Maybe that's a good place to stop this one.
Exactly.
All right.
On that one.
All right. Okay. Oh, get the bracelet.
Yep.
Get Mika's Morse bracelet. Go check it out on the store.
Wear justice.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.